Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Declan's boots crunched on crystalline soil as he traced the mutant's trail through Grata's twisted landscape. Ancient metal spires pierced the violet sky, their surfaces dulled by centuries of savage storms. His tracker beeped steadily, leading him deeper into the maze of ruins and overgrown vegetation. Another day, another monster, he muttered, adjusting the plasma rifle slung across his back. The bounty for this one was substantial, enough to keep him in fuel and supplies for months. Syntech wasn't usually this generous with their contracts, which made him wonder what they weren't telling him. A distant screech echoed through the ruins, followed by something that sounded almost like singing? Declan froze, his hand moving to his weapon. The tracker's signal grew stronger, pulsing rapidly as he approached a clearing ahead. The trap was crude but effective, a deep pit ringed with sharpened stakes driven into the ground at angles. Whoever had set it knew their business. Declan crouched at the edge, expecting to find the reported dangerous mutant. What he saw instead stopped his breath. 3 women huddled at the bottom of the pit, their skin a striking shade of green that seemed to shimmer in the dying sunlight. They wore simple white garments that looked like laboratory wear, now torn and dirty. But it was their leader who captured his full attention. She stood tall despite their dire situation, her posture radiating defiance. Her features were striking, high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that seemed to glow with an inner fire. When she spoke, her voice carried an otherworldly melody that sent a shiver down his spine. "Well," she demanded, "are you going to stand there staring, or are you going to help us?" Declan kept his expression neutral, though something about her fierce dignity stirred something he'd thought long buried. "That depends. What exactly are you?" "We're people," she shot back, "though I suspect that's not the answer you're looking for, bounty hunter." He raised an eyebrow. "You know what I am?" "The weapon, the tracker, that look of professional detachment. It's not difficult to figure out." She crossed her arms, the movement causing her skin to ripple with an iridescent glow. "I'm Mila, and you are?" "Declan Crow." He studied the pit's construction. "This trap wasn't meant for you, was it?" "No," one of the other women whispered. "It was meant for us after we became this." Mila shot her companion a warning look, but Declan had already caught the implication. "After? What exactly did Syntech do to you?" "Why don't you ask your employers?" Mila's tone was bitter. "They're the ones who turned us into energy vessels, living batteries for their precious power grid." Declan's jaw tightened. He'd done plenty of questionable jobs for Syntech, but human experimentation, that was a line he hadn't expected them to cross. "Tell me more." "Why? So you can decide if we're worth more alive or dead?" Mila's words dripped with sarcasm, but he caught the fear beneath her bravado. "So I can decide if I'm on the right side of this contract." He met her gaze steadily. "Tell me everything." For a long moment they stared at each other in tense silence. Then Mila's shoulders dropped slightly. "They told us we were volunteers for an energy efficiency program. By the time we understood what they really planned, it was too late. They changed us, made us into something that could generate and store massive amounts of free energy. Which they then harvested," Declan finished grimly. "How many others?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds," Mila's voice caught. "We managed to escape during a power fluctuation, but the others," she gestured to her companions, "were all that made it out." Declan stood, his decision made. He'd done plenty of morally gray work in his time, but this was different. This was slavery, pure and simple. And despite his reputation, there were some lines he wouldn't cross. "Stand back," he called down, unslinging his rifle. "Wait!" Mila's eyes widened in alarm. "What are you—" The plasma burst carved through the wooden stakes like paper, creating an escape route. Declan tossed down a length of cord. "Climb, quickly." We don't have much time before they realize their trap caught something other than what they were expecting. Mila moved with unexpected grace despite her imprisonment, leading her companions up the rope. As she reached the top, Declan offered his hand. Her skin was warm to the touch, almost vibrating with contained energy. "Careful," she warned, pulling away quickly. "We're not entirely stable yet." A distant whine cut through the air. Transport engines. Declan's tracker began blaring proximity alerts. "Company's coming," he muttered, scanning the horizon. "3 ships, maybe 4. We need to move." "Why are you helping us?" Mila asked as they began running toward the ruins. "Your bounty. Can't spend credits if I can't live with myself." He guided them toward a narrow gap between 2 fallen structures. Besides, Syntex had this coming for a while. They ducked into the shadow of an ancient archway just as the first ship swept overhead. Searchlights cut through the gathering dusk, scanning the area around the pit. Declan pressed closer to Mila, feeling the subtle hum of energy emanating from her body. "You're like a living power cell," he whispered. "More than you know." She turned to face him, their faces inches apart. "It's not just energy we generate, it's something else. Something they couldn't control. That's why we were able to escape." One of her companions, a shorter woman with darker green skin, suddenly gasped. "They're deploying ground units." Declan risked a peek around the archway. Armored figures were rappelling from the hovering transports, their weapons already drawn. He recognized the tactical pattern. Standard Syntex security sweep. "We need a diversion," he said, reaching for his belt. "How much control do you have over your abilities?" Mila's skin flickered with internal light. "Enough to make things interesting. What did you have in mind?" "Those power signatures they're tracking. Let's give them something to chase." He pulled out a handful of pulse grenades. "Think you can amplify these?" A slow smile spread across Mila's face. She reached out, her fingers brushing the grenades. They began to glow with the same ethereal light as her skin. "Your toys just got an upgrade," she said, and for the first time he caught a hint of playfulness in her tone. "Try not to blow yourself up with them. Your concern is touching." He couldn't help grinning back. "When I throw these, run for that fallen spire. There's a maintenance tunnel underneath. Used to use it for smuggling runs." "A bounty hunter and a smuggler? You're just full of surprises." "Lady, you have no idea." He pulled the pin on the first grenade. "Ready?" The enhanced explosives did more than create a diversion. They sent cascading waves of energy through the ruins, overloading every sensor in range. In the chaos that followed, Declan led the women through the underground passage, trying to ignore the way his skin tingled whenever Mila brushed against him. They emerged half a kilometer away, the sounds of confusion still echoing behind them. Declan's ship waited in a hidden alcove, its stealth systems keeping it invisible to casual scans. "It's not much," he said as the boarding ramp descended, "but it's fast and it's off their grids." Mila paused before entering. "You understand what this means. They'll hunt you too now." "Wouldn't be the first time I've had to disappear." He shrugged. "Besides, someone needs to expose what they're doing. And you're just the noble hero to do it." Her tone was skeptical, but her eyes held something else. Interest, maybe even admiration. "Noble? No, but I do have my moments." He gestured toward the ship. "After you." As they lifted off, breaking through Grata's atmosphere under cover of darkness, Declan knew his life had just become infinitely more complicated. But watching Mila's face as she saw the stars for the first time as a free woman, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. His tracker chirped one final time before he disabled it. Someone had just placed a massive bounty on his head. The game was officially on. "So," he called back to his passengers, "who's hungry? I know a place in the outer rings where they don't ask questions and serve actual food instead of protein paste." "Food can wait," Mila said, moving to stand beside him in the cockpit. "First, you need to understand exactly what you've gotten yourself into." The serious tone in her voice made him glance up. Her skin was glowing brighter now, pulsing in rhythm with the ship's engines. "We're not just escaped experiments, Declan. We're the prototype for something bigger, something that could change everything." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and this time the energy that passed between them felt almost intentional. "Why do I get the feeling I'm going to regret asking about this?" But he was already smiling, the familiar thrill of diving into trouble coursing through his veins. "Probably," she agreed, returning his smile with one of her own. "But something tells me you're going to help us anyway." And damn if she wasn't right about that. 6 hours earlier, Rilken van Kreis stood at the observation window of Syntech's orbital facility, watching the swirling storms over Grata's surface. His white corporate uniform gleamed under the artificial lights, a stark contrast to the mercenary gear he'd worn in his bounty hunting days. "Sir," a technician interrupted his thoughts, "we've lost contact with test subjects 23, 24, and 25. Rilken's jaw tightened. 3 years of research, billions in development, and now this. "Show me." The holographic display flickered to life, showing security footage from the testing chamber. He watched as the power fluctuation hit, saw the containment fields fail. The 3 women, their skin already transformed by the energy integration process, didn't waste a second. They moved like they'd planned this, like they'd been waiting. "Fascinating," he murmured. "They're learning to channel the energy faster than we predicted." "Sir?" The technician looked nervous. "Should I alert Central?" "No." Rilken straightened his uniform. "This is an opportunity. Send out the standard bounty notice. Make it attractive, enough to draw experienced hunters." He knew exactly who would respond. Declan had always been predictable that way, even back when they'd worked together. His old partner had a weakness for profitable jobs and an even bigger weakness for playing hero when the situation called for it. The trap was crude but effective. They'd used similar setups a dozen times during their hunting days. Now, all he had to do was wait. Hours passed. Reports came in of energy signatures moving through the ruins. Then the explosions, far more powerful than standard ordnance. Rilken smiled. The vessels were already adapting, enhancing whatever they touched. And Declan, right on schedule, was making the exact choice Rilken had counted on. "Sir, Hunter Crow's tracker just went dark. He's helping them escape." "Of course he is." Rilken opened a comm channel. "Update the bounty. Add Declan Crow to the target list. Priority 1. "The board won't like this exposure," his assistant warned. "The board doesn't understand what we're dealing with." Rilken turned back to the window. "These women aren't just batteries. They're the next step. Evolution accelerated. And now, thanks to my old friend, we'll see exactly what they're capable of." He thought back to their last job together, before he'd accepted Syntech's offer. Declan had called him a sellout, said he was trading his soul for a corporate paycheck. Maybe he was right. But someone had to make the hard choices, had to push progress forward no matter the cost. "Prepare my ship," he ordered, "and get me everything we have on their potential destinations. Declan's good, but he's predictable. He'll head for the outer rings, try to disappear in the fringe colonies." As his team scrambled to comply, Rilken allowed himself a moment of nostalgia. He and Declan had been more than partners. They'd been brothers in all but blood. But that was before he'd seen the bigger picture, before he'd understood what humanity needed to survive in this harsh universe. "I'm sorry, old friend," he whispered to the stars. "But you've just made yourself part of the experiment. You know this place is a dive, right?" Mila leaned against the bar counter of the Nova Drift, one of countless seedy establishments floating in the asteroid belt of the outer rings. Her green skin caught the pulsing neon lights, creating an otherworldly display that drew more than a few stares from the patrons. Declan knocked back his whiskey, enjoying the burn. "Best dives make the best hiding spots. Nobody asks questions here, because they're too drunk to remember the answers." She raised an eyebrow at a particularly rowdy group of spacers in the corner. "Exactly." He signaled the bartender for another round. The other two women, Sarah and Nia, had retired to their rooms hours ago, but Mila seemed determined to match him drink for drink. "Your tolerance is impressive," he noted as she downed another shot without flinching. "Side effect of the transformation. We process everything differently now." She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his. The contact sent a subtle charge through his body, like static electricity but warmer, including proximity to others. "Is that why you keep finding excuses to touch me? Maybe I just like watching you try not to react." Her smile was teasing, but there was something else in her eyes, a hunger that had nothing to do with the drinks. The moment was shattered by a news holo flickering to life above the bar. Declan's face appeared alongside a bounty notice that made several nearby patrons whistle appreciatively. "Your friend Rilken doesn't mess around," Mila observed. "He never did." Declan's mood darkened at the mention of his former partner, even before he sold his soul to Syntech. "Tell me about him." She turned to face him fully, and that strange energy hummed between them again. "What happened?" Declan stared into his glass, memories surfacing like bodies in a deep ocean. "We were more than partners. Brothers, really. Took the same jobs, watched each other's backs, shared everything." He laughed bitterly. "Until we didn't." "What changed?" "We had a job go bad. Real bad. The kind that makes you question everything." He signaled for another drink. Rilken decided the galaxy needed more order, more control. Said the corporations were the only ones with the resources to make it happen. Me? I figured we had enough jackboots stomping on necks already. So he joined Syntech, and I kept doing what I do best, staying just outside the law. Declan turned to face her. "What about you? What was your life like before they changed you?" "I was a researcher, theoretical physics." She smiled at his surprised look. "What? You thought I was just a pretty face with green skin?" "Never made that mistake." He found himself staring at her lips, wondering if they'd taste like the whiskey she'd been drinking. Though the green skin is definitely a bonus. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Want to know a secret? It's not just my skin that changed color." Before he could process that particular mental image, the bar's security system blared a warning. Armed figures in Syntech gear were storming the station's main docking ring. "Time to go." Declan grabbed Mila's hand, ignoring the electric tingle that shot up his arm. "Back exit now." They sprinted through the crowded bar, shoving past drunken patrons. Behind them, someone shouted recognition. Credits were credits after all, and that bounty would buy a lot of drinks. "Sarah and Nia?" Mila asked as they ran. "Secondary extraction point. They'll meet us at the ship." He pulled her down a maintenance corridor just as plasma fire erupted behind them, assuming we make it there alive. The maintenance corridor twisted through the station's guts, steam hissing from ancient pipes. Mila's skin cast an ethereal glow in the dim lighting, making their path easier to navigate. "They're hurting us," Declan muttered as another security barrier slammed shut ahead. "Rilken's using old hunting patterns." "Then let's disappoint him." Mila pressed her hand against the barrier's control panel. Energy surged from her fingers, overloading the system. The barrier sparked and died. Handy trick. You have no idea. She winked at him. Though it does leave me a bit stimulated. Before Declan could respond to that loaded statement, a familiar voice echoed through the corridor's comm system. Getting sloppy, Dec. Rilken's tone was almost friendly. Time was, you'd have 3 escape routes planned before stepping foot in a place like this. Maybe I'm just getting predictable in my old age. Declan drew his sidearm, scanning for cameras. How's the corporate life treating you, brother? Better than running from progress. These women, what they represent, it's bigger than both of us. Funny how progress always seems to involve hurting people. They reached a junction, and Declan pulled Mila behind a power conduit as footsteps approached. His body pressed against hers, and the energy emanating from her skin intensified. Focus, he whispered, though his own concentration was wavering. I am focused, she breathed against his ear, on several things at once. The footsteps passed. They moved on, but Declan noticed Mila stayed closer than necessary, her fingers brushing his arm occasionally as they ran. Remember Centauri Prime? Rilken's voice followed them. The job that changed everything? You mean when we discovered your corporate friends were experimenting on refugees? Declan's jaw clenched. Yeah, I remember. We could have made a difference from the inside. Changed the system. The system changed you, Real. Made you forget what it's like to be human. They burst into a cargo bay, and Declan's heart sank. A dozen armed troops waited with Rilken standing calmly at their center. He looked exactly as he had 6 months ago. Pristine white uniform, perfectly groomed, cold efficiency in his eyes. Last chance, old friend. Rilken held out his hand. Join us. Help us guide humanity's evolution. Evolution shouldn't need a cage. Declan moved to shield Mila, but she stepped forward instead. Neither should love, she said, and her skin began to pulse with blinding energy. The cargo bay erupted in chaos. Mila's power surged outward, shorting weapons and scrambling targeting systems. Declan moved on instinct, dropping 3 guards before they could switch to manual aim. But Rilken was faster than he remembered. The stun blast caught Declan in the chest, sending him sprawling. Through blurring vision, he saw Mila turn toward him, her face twisted in fury. The energy around her intensified until she was almost too bright to look at. Don't! He tried to warn her, seeing how the power was affecting her, but she was beyond hearing. The blast wave knocked everyone off their feet. Alarm screamed as the bay's artificial gravity fluctuated. Declan fought through the paralysis, crawling toward Mila's crumpled form. Next time, brother, Rilken's voice came weakly from somewhere in the chaos. And there will be a next time. Declan barely made it back to the ship with Mila unconscious in his arms. Sarah and Nia were already aboard, having fought their own way through Syntech forces. As they broke orbit, Mila stirred in the medical bay. That was reckless, he said softly, watching color return to her pale green skin. Says the man who tried to take on a dozen troops. Her voice was weak, but retained that playful edge. Besides, I saved your life. At what cost? He checked her vitals on the scanner. You nearly burned yourself out. Worth it. She caught his hand and the familiar energy spark felt dimmer. You're not the only one who protects what they care about. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. Before either could speak, the ship shuddered under weapons fire. Pursuit craft, Sarah called from the cockpit. 3 of them. Declan reluctantly pulled away. Rest. I'll handle this. The next hour was a blur of evasive maneuvers through the asteroid belt. Declan's ship might have been outdated, but he knew every trick it could perform. By the time they lost the last pursuer, they were deep in uncharted space. We need somewhere to lay low, he announced, setting course for a distant space station. I know a place, off the grid, independent, called Heaven's Edge. Sounds romantic. Mila had appeared in the cockpit doorway looking steadier. It's unique, he smirked. Ever been to a cyber hotel? Heaven's Edge lived up to its reputation. The station was a neon-drenched paradise for those looking to disappear, its lower levels a maze of entertainment venues and questionable establishments. The cyber hotel Declan chose was discreet, its rooms shielded against scanning. One room? Mila raised an eyebrow as they checked in. Safer together. Sarah and Nia have the room next door. He tried to sound professional, but his pulse quickened when she smiled. The room was luxurious by spacer standards. Actual water shower, wide viewport, and a bed big enough for two. Declan busied himself checking security while Mila explored. "Your friend Rilken," she said finally. "He really believes he's doing the right thing, doesn't he? That's what makes him dangerous." Declan sat heavily on the room's small couch. He sees the big picture, but forgets about the people in it. Mila sat beside him closer than necessary. "Like you forgot about everyone but me today?" The question hung between them. Declan turned to face her, and the usual energy field around her seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. "I don't forget," he said quietly. "I choose." She leaned forward, her lips brushing his ear. "Then choose now." The kiss was electric, literally. Energy danced between them as their lips met, and Declan felt every nerve in his body come alive. Mila's skin glowed brighter with each touch, her power responding to their shared passion. "This could be dangerous," he managed between kisses. "Everything worth having is." She pulled him closer. "Besides, I think I'm starting to understand these powers better. They're not just about energy, they're about connection." As if to prove her point, the light emanating from her skin enveloped them both, creating a cocoon of warmth and sensation. Every touch was amplified, every feeling shared between them. "Still worried about danger?" she whispered against his lips. His answer was lost in another kiss, and then there were no more words needed. Rilken stood in his private quarters aboard the Syntech pursuit vessel, staring at an old holo photo. Two younger men grinned back at him, himself and Declan, arms around each other's shoulders after their first successful bounty. He touched the image, and it shifted to show more memories. Shared drinks in seedy bars, close calls during hunts, quiet moments between jobs. "Sir," his comm unit buzzed, "Director Walsh is demanding an update." Rilken straightened his uniform, tucking away the holo. The stern face of his superior materialized before him. "You assured me you could contain this situation." Walsh's artificial calm barely masked her fury. "Instead, we have 3 escaped assets, a compromised facility, and your personal connection to the bounty hunter is becoming problematic." "Declan is predictable," Rilken maintained his composure. "He's protecting them because he thinks it's right, but he doesn't understand what's really at stake." "And do you, Van Kreis?" Walsh leaned forward. "Let me be clear. The board has invested billions in Project Vessel. If these prototypes reach the media, if anyone learns what they're truly capable of, this isn't just about clean energy anymore. You've seen the data. What they're evolving into could change everything," Rilken finished. "I know. That's why Declan needs to understand. If I could just talk to him." "Your friendship is clouding your judgment." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "You have 48 hours to recover the assets and eliminate the leak. Fail, and you'll wish termination of employment was all you had to worry about. Remember what happened to your predecessor." The transmission cut off. Rilken's fist clenched, crumpling the holo photo he'd been holding. "New signals, sir," his tactical officer reported. "We've traced them to Heaven's Edge station." "Of course," Rilken almost smiled. He always did like that place. Prepare a team, but maintain distance. I want to handle this personally. As his team geared up, Rilken reviewed the latest data from Project Vessel. The energy readings from the cargo bay incident were off the charts, but it was the pattern that troubled him. The vessel, Mila, had somehow synchronized her output with Declan's biological signatures. They were bonding in ways the lab had never predicted. "What are you really becoming?" he muttered, studying the readings. Part of him, the scientist that still believed in progress, was fascinated. But another part, the man who still remembered what it meant to be human, whispered doubts. He remembered Centauri Prime, the refugee camp, the corporate experiments they'd discovered. Declan had wanted to expose everything. Rilken had seen a bigger picture, humanity advancing through controlled evolution, guided by those with the vision to shape the future. "We're ready, sir," his tactical team leader reported. Rilken nodded, checking his custom sidearm. "Remember, non-lethal force only. The vessels must not be damaged." He paused. "And Declan is to be taken alive if possible." "Sir?" The team leader hesitated. Director Walsh's orders were clear about witnesses. "I'll handle Walsh." Rilken's tone left no room for argument. Declan might still be turned, made to understand. But as they approached Heaven's Edge, doubts gnawed at him. The data showed the vessels weren't just batteries. They were catalysts for human evolution. Uncontrolled, that power could tear society apart. The corporations provided structure, order, necessary controls. Yet he couldn't forget Declan's words in the cargo bay. Evolution shouldn't need a cage. His comm unit chirped, another message from Walsh. He ignored it. 48 hours to choose between his friend and his convictions, between order and chaos, between the future he believed in and the humanity he was starting to fear he'd lost. "Track them," he ordered, "but hold position. I need to think." The stars stretched endlessly before him, offering no answers. Somewhere out there, his oldest friend was protecting something Rilken both feared and desperately wanted to understand. The question was, when the moment came, could he pull the trigger? Or would the ghost of who he used to be finally force him to question everything he'd become? Dawn's cycle on Heaven's Edge brought new complications. Declan woke to find Mila glowing brighter than ever, her power somehow amplified by their night together. She lay watching him, her green skin shimmering with internal light. "That's new," he murmured, touching her cheek. "Everything's new," she replied. "I can feel you, even when we're not touching, like an echo." Their moment was interrupted by urgent knocking. Sarah burst in, her face pale. "Syntech vessels, dozens of them. They've surrounded the station." Declan was already moving, checking weapons and escape routes, but Mila caught his arm, her expression serious. "There's something else." She pressed his hand to her abdomen, still faintly glowing. Something impossible. Before she could explain, the station's alerts blared. Rilken's voice filled every channel. "This is your last chance, Dec. Walsh has ordered termination protocols. I can't protect you anymore." His voice cracked slightly. "Don't make me choose." Declan looked at Mila, saw the fear and determination in her eyes. Whatever was happening between them, whatever impossible thing they'd created, he knew they were past the point of surrender. "You already chose, Real," he broadcast back. "Years ago on Centauri Prime. Now it's time to live with it." As they prepared for their final run, Declan caught a glimpse of data scrolling across a terminal. Project Vessel's true purpose. It wasn't just about energy. They were creating something that could change the very nature of human evolution. And now, looking at Mila's glowing form, he understood exactly why Rilken feared it. Change was coming, ready or not. The only question was who would survive to see it. The station trembled as Syntech forces began their approach. Declan pulled Mila close, feeling that strange new energy pulsing between them. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "no regrets." She kissed him fiercely. "None." Behind them, Sarah and Nia prepared for battle, their own powers building. Above them, Rilken watched the approaching storm, his hand hovering over the command to fire. The Syntech flagship, Ascendant, loomed before them, a monument to corporate might stretching nearly a kilometer across the void. Declan's small ship approached under stolen clearance codes, his heart pounding as they passed through the security screen. "Ready?" he asked Mila, who sat in the co-pilot seat glowing faintly. "Born ready." She squeezed his hand, sending that familiar energy spark through him. "Though I wish our first date had been somewhere less murdery. Infiltrating a corporate flagship to free your people isn't romantic enough for you. It's a start." Her smile faded as they approached the docking bay. "Declan, if something goes wrong..." "Nothing's going wrong." He cut her off, not ready to face that possibility. "We get in, free the others, expose everything to the media, and get out. Simple." Since when has anything involving us been simple? The docking procedure went smoothly, too smoothly. As they exited the ship, Declan's instinct screamed trap. Sarah and Nia followed, their own green skin dimmed to avoid detection. The first sign of trouble came from Nia. She hesitated at a junction, her eyes darting nervously. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "They said they'd kill my sister." Security doors slammed shut as alarms blared. Syntech troops poured in from both directions, led by Walsh herself, a tall woman whose cybernetic enhancements glinted under the harsh lights. "Predictable," she sneered. "Though I expected better from you, Declan. Rilken spoke so highly of your tactical abilities." "Where is he?" Declan demanded, noting Rilken's absence. "Confined. His emotional attachment to you proved problematic." Walsh gestured and the troops raised their weapons. "Now, shall we discuss surrender?" Mila's answer was a blast of pure energy that sent 3 guards flying. Chaos erupted as Declan dove for cover, returning fire while Sarah dragged the sobbing Nia behind a cargo container. "The labs!" Mila shouted over the firefight. "They're below us! I can feel them!" Declan saw his chance when a stray shot hit a coolant pipe. Steam filled the corridor, and he grabbed Mila's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the steam, trusting Mila's connection to guide them. Behind them, Walsh was shouting orders, her cybernetic voice cutting through the chaos. "Find them, and someone get Van Kreis up here. Let him watch his friend die." The labs were a nightmare made real. Dozens of containment cells lined the walls, each holding a woman in various stages of transformation. Some glowed like Mila, others lay still, their green skin barely shimmering. "Monsters," Mila breathed, pressing her hand against the nearest cell. "They're dying." "Not for long." Declan started working on the control panel. "Can you—" "Already on it." Energy flowed from her fingers into the system, but something was wrong. The power seemed to hurt her, and she stumbled back. "They've modified the containment fields," a familiar voice said, "learning from their mistakes." Rilken stepped from the shadows, looking disheveled in his once pristine uniform. A fresh bruise marked his face. "Real." Declan kept his weapon raised. "What did they do to you?" "Showed me the truth. Finally." He held up a data crystal. "Project Vessel isn't about energy production. It never was. They're trying to force evolution, create a new species they can control. But it's killing them. Killing all of them." "Why tell us this now?" "Because you were right, Dec. All those years ago on Centauri Prime, you were right." Rilken's composure cracked. "I thought I was serving progress, but I was just another puppet. Walsh, she's insane. The board's insane. They don't care how many die." Alarms blared as security forces approached. Rilken straightened. The containment system has a weakness. Overload it here and here. He pointed to specific nodes. But it'll trigger a cascade. Someone has to stay and maintain the sequence. Real? No. It's the only way. He managed a ghost of his old smile. Besides, I owe you. For Centauri. For everything. Before Declan could argue, Mila suddenly gasped, her hands flying to her stomach. The glow around her intensified. Declan, she whispered, eyes wide. I can feel it. A life. Our life. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Impossible, yet undeniable. The energy, their connection, it had created something unprecedented. Rilken's eyes softened. Well, brother, looks like you're going to be a father. He started typing commands into the system. One more reason for you to live through this. Rill, remember when you promised to be godfather to my kids? Rilken's fingers flew over the controls. Guess I'll have to settle for being uncle to yours. Now go. Walsh is coming, and this place is about to get very bright. We're not leaving you. Declan moved toward his friend, but Mila's sudden scream stopped him. Walsh and her forces had arrived, cybernetic implants glowing with combat enhancements. How touching. A family reunion. It's over, Walsh. Rilken's voice carried new strength. I've transmitted everything to the Galactic Media Network. The experiments, the deaths, all of it. You think that matters? She laughed. We own the media. We own, not these channels. Rilken's smile was cold. I learned a few things running Black Ops for you. The transmission's already gone viral. Independent networks across 3 sectors. Declan saw Walsh's cybernetic eye twitch, the first sign of real fear. Kill them all, she ordered. Everything happened at once. Mila's power surged outward as Declan opened fire. Rilken slammed the final sequence into the controls, and the containment fields began to overload. Deck! Rilken shouted over the chaos. Get her to safety. The baby. Protect them both. The imprisoned vessels were awakening, their combined energy building to impossible levels. Walsh's forces fell back as green light filled the chamber. Brother, Declan reached for Rilken one last time. Go. Live. Rilken met his eyes. And tell my godchild about their uncle who finally did one thing right. The explosion started at the core of the containment system. Declan carried Mila toward the exit as waves of energy cascaded through the ship. Behind them, Rilken stood at the controls, manually directing the power surge to protect their escape. The last thing Declan saw was his oldest friend, bathed in green light, smiling that same confident smile from their first job together. Then the world went white. They barely made it to their ship as the Ascendant began to tear itself apart. Freed vessels were escaping in every direction, their combined power shorting out pursuit craft. Rilken, Declan whispered, watching the flagship's destruction through blurred vision. Mila took his hand, placing it on her stomach. The small pulse of new life thrummed against his palm. He saved us all, she said softly. He saved the future. 6 months later, New Terra Colony. The garden was alive with lights, both artificial and natural. Dozens of freed vessels, their green skin glowing softly in the twilight, mingled with humans and other species. At the center of it all, Declan watched Mila approach in a flowing white dress that seemed to capture and enhance her natural radiance. You're staring, she teased as she reached him. Can you blame me? He took her hand, feeling that familiar energy spark between them. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Sarah, fully recovered from her sister Nia's reluctant betrayal, stood as witness. Nia herself had been pardoned after helping other vessels escape during the chaos. She watched from the crowd, her own healing journey visible in her tentative smile. News from across the galaxy played on floating screens around the garden. Syntech's collapse had sparked a revolution. The exposure of Project Vessel had led to corporate reforms and new protections for enhanced beings. Walsh and her board faced trials for crimes against sentient life. But the biggest changes were more personal. Declan felt it when Mila squeezed his hand, their baby's energy, already strong, responding to both parents. The scientists called it a miracle, the first natural breeding between enhanced and normal humans. Declan just called it hope. "I want to show you something," Mila said after the ceremony, leading him to a quiet corner of the garden. She handed him a data pad. "Our new venture." The logo read, "Crow Protection Services, Safeguarding Enhanced Rights." "A security corporation?" He raised an eyebrow. "Someone needs to protect people like me. Who better than the man who started it all?" Her smile turned mischievous. "Besides, I hear the boss's wife is quite powerful." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both." She pulled him close, her glow intensifying. "Rilken would have loved this, you know. Us turning corporate, but doing it right. He'd have insisted on being CEO." Declan's voice caught slightly. "And spoiling his godchild rotten. He still saved us all." Mila touched his cheek. "And now we honor that by protecting others." Above them, the stars shone bright and clear. Somewhere out there, other vessels were finding their way to freedom. The universe was changing, evolution taking its natural course without cages or controls. "So," Mila's eyes sparkled with that familiar mix of playfulness and passion. "Ready for another adventure?" Declan pulled her closer, feeling their shared energy dance between them. "With you? Always." Their kiss lit up the garden, a beacon of green light reaching toward the stars. And in that light was everything Rilken had died to protect: love, freedom, and the promise of a future unbound by corporate chains. The end. In crafting this tale of loyalty, betrayal, and redemption, I found myself reflecting deeply on the nature of true friendship. Not the casual connections we make in passing, but those rare bonds that shape who we are and who we become. Like Declan and Rilken, real friendship often faces its greatest test not in moments of crisis, but in the quiet decisions we make when principles and loyalty collide. Sometimes, the truest act of friendship is having the courage to tell someone they're wrong. Other times, it's sacrificing everything to help them find their way back to the light. This story is dedicated to those friends who stand by us even when the rest of the galaxy seems to have turned its back. To the ones who remember who we were and believe in who we can be. To those who would risk everything: career, safety, even life itself, to protect not just us, but what we hold dear. And most importantly, to those friends who, like Rilken, love us enough to admit their mistakes and make them right, no matter the cost. May we all be blessed with such friendship in our lives, and may we have the courage to be such friends to others. Because in the end, while the energy that powered Mila might have been extraordinary, it was the power of true friendship that saved them all. To the Rilkens in our lives, thank you. Your sacrifice changes worlds. And to the Declans, never stop believing in the friends who've lost their way. Sometimes, the longest journey home begins with someone still believing in us. Keep reaching for the stars, but never forget the hands that help you climb.
Like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep creating amazing content for you.